Welcome to Class Act Coaching, a podcast for teachers and instructional coaches. This show is brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. At SREB, we believe every one of you deserves a coach. Whether you're inspiring students or guiding teachers, let our school improvement team be your coach this week. Welcome back. This is our last episode of the school year. I don't know how many of you out there are winding up and how many are already finished listening to this now, but we wanted to do, like we did last semester, wrap-up episode to end the school year. And I am here right now with both of my co-hosts from this semester, Jason and Dan. Hi, Jason and Dan.
Hello, Ashley.
Hi, Ashley.
So last semester, we ended by talking about the themes we saw from the first half of the episodes that we did. And so we did that again. We found some themes. And as we're pulling themes from the episodes from the 2025 season episodes, Dan had a few questions that he wished had been covered. And so we decided he's going to take over this episode. He's going to be the host today. And we're going to talk about these themes we noticed as Dan guides us through his questions. So Dan, you want to take it from here?
Oh boy, this is my dream. It's finally coming true.
I'm trying to laugh at your jokes now because you told me one time I don't laugh at you enough. So
yeah, see,
that was very funny.
Well done. See, he learns. These are the priorities on this podcast.
Yeah.
Jason and Ashley, three things that I saw come up in a lot of these conversations. One was the power of collaboration. And that kind of falls under this idea that I think Michelle spoke about, which is collective teacher efficacy. They talked about this guy, John Hattie, who's done meta research, where he takes all of the different research that's been done, or a lot of it, combines it together, and does a statistical analysis to see what has the most impact or what the different impacts are of different factors from the home, from school, from the teacher, from the student. And the one that has the highest impact on student achievement beyond poverty, beyond strategies, or the way that the student comes to class or acts in class, or the way the classroom is structured, the number one is something called collective teacher efficacy. And I hear that and I think to myself, okay, what does that mean? And I did a little research, and it says here, it is the collective belief of the staff of the school and their ability to positively affect students. Now, that is from John Hattie himself. So then I think to myself, okay, great. So all I got to do is believe. It's kind of like Peter Pan and
Tinkerbell.
Tinkerbell. Yeah. Maybe if we can all just say out loud, I believe, then our school will be successful. It's like wizardry. But I don't think it's that simple. So my question is, what does it mean? But more importantly, like, what does it look like? Jason, you've been going out to schools for 20 years now. So you've seen probably a lot of examples of high collective teacher efficacy and maybe not so much. So can you talk about, like, in your view, what this looks like? Like, what would you look for in a school if you're trying to see if that's in place?
Yeah, that's a great comment. I think, first of all, I want to echo, I think if you ask teachers the question, do you believe your instruction positively impacts student learning? I mean, what teacher's really going to say no?
Right.
We all believe that, right? Or we would say it.
That's what I was thinking. They'd say it. Do they?
Right. So how could, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So everyone, right.
Then I go into the classroom. We go into the classroom, we visit. And there are, I always want to say every action they take either reinforces that they believe what they say, or that their actions reiterate what they say, or sometimes their actions tell a different story. And so, like, example, in a math classroom, the questions teachers ask, let me know, they ask questions, they lead kids to the answer. The kids are simply just, there's a multi-step problem, and the teacher breaks it into individual steps so that the student doesn't have to problem solve at all. That tells me something versus, hey, go ahead and pose a difficult problem and everybody goes out and tries it in their struggle. One of the things that I love to do as a teacher that almost tells me, do they believe their kid, that their instruction positively impacts students, that their students can do it? I just, after the lesson's done, oh, Jason, I did this cool problem. Oh, great. Can I see the student work? I start looking through the student work. Every paper looks the same. What's that communicate? When they analyze, like if you see every paper's the same,
Right.
You did too much as a teacher, right? You gave it away. I need like, or you just nailed it. And I guess, but most of the time, if I have variance in student work, that's a good formative assessment picture. And then I can bring that to the teacher meeting that we're having, and I can share my batch of student work, and I see another teacher's batch of student work, and we can start to have quality discussions about the instruction that occurred.
So you're saying if everybody has the same thing, it means that you're just teaching them how to do something lower level and think that they're able to do it?
I would contend that it means that maybe you over scaffolded. I think it came up in Jen Zelina's episode as she taught this lesson. She thought about Pharaoh, Egyptian pharaohs. She was underwhelmed by how it went. Well, when she reflected, everybody's paper looked the same. She gave them the 3 categories that they were going to collect: before her reign, during her reign, after her reign, right? And so everybody's paper looked the same. If she would have just given the graphic organizer and said, and that's what we talked about in this lesson, the podcast. And if she would have just given the graphic organizer and said, hey, I want you to read this. I want you to break this into 3 main categories. Go. Some kids might have looked at different categories. It wouldn't have always been before, during, after. I think that's interesting versus everybody's looks the same. I think that communicates something about, do I believe my kids can come up with these major categories, or do I have to give it to them?
So over scaffolding and sort of not giving kids opportunities to think is indicating what you believe that they can do. And so I think the other thing I would say is collective teacher efficacy means collectively. I think that collective is an interesting point of it. Collectively analyzing what we're doing and how we're doing it.
So I want to say though, because this is reminding me of something. When I was getting my master's, I read, and so it's been a while, so hopefully I'm quoting this person accurately, or the concept of the paper accurately, but I read this paper of, this would have been a college level teacher, but it was teacher at a 2-year college, not a high performing school, a lot of non-English speaking students. And she took over the English department, and she basically said, well, the curriculum's too easy. And they're like, no, that doesn't make sense. They're struggling. And she was like, yeah, they can handle harder work than this. Trust them. And basically it increased the work, not increased the amount of work, but the difficulty and the interestingness of the work. And she said, trust the students and they're going to do better. And she was right. And that kind of is what I'm hearing you guys say, or reminds me a lot of that it's, you can kind of be like, oh, well, the students, they're not going to get this. So I'm going to just kind of walk them through it and give them the answer. And then they're not going to learn anything. But if you trust them and they're like, hey, they're going to figure it out, then they'll actually start learning. So that's how I'm thinking what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think that the collaborative planning that we talk about can hopefully reinforce that, because we open our teacher's edition. It has this assignment that's laid out, and we look together and or it could reinforce either, right? Oh, there's no way my kids can do that. I've got to give them something versus, right. I'm not sure if my kids can do this. Let's give it to them and see how they do. Or
I know my kids can't do this, comma, yet.
Right.
So I walk over to Mrs. Johnson and we look at it and we break it down and we say, okay, what skills do they need? And then what are some ways I can build those skills and then build on those skills and then build on those skills so that by the end, they can do it. If not, they can't do it. So I just do the simpler thing. I may be doing something simpler first with the intention of getting to that standard or to that, whatever that assignment's assessing.
Right.
Another thing that I think is important for collective teacher efficacy as a look for, as something to build into your classroom and into your school, is how you use data and how you use assessment data. So I go to some schools and maybe there's a benchmark, maybe there isn't. And if there is, it's kind of, yeah, butted. Or, well, it's not really well aligned. Well, it was too hard for them. Well, blah, blah, blah. And it's sort of brushed to the side. As Seinfeld would say, it's yada yada. Whereas I think collective teacher efficacy, if I believe that I have the capacity to teach my students and to have that teaching have a direct impact on them learning standards, then I'm going to want to know at all times exactly how much they know,
right,
and see that visually, and then take that and work with people collectively to understand what that data means and what it's telling me and what it's not telling me. Michelle Harada did a beautiful job in her episode talking about teachers in collaborative groups asking themselves, what do my students need to know? How will I know if they learned it? How will I know if they didn't? What will I do if they learn it, if they don't know it? And what will I do if they do learn it? Now, those are questions for PLCs. In a school that has high collective teacher efficacy, those questions and that process is in the DNA of the school. And it's visible to the teachers and to the students because we believe, I wouldn't put these numbers up if I didn't think we could do it, right? If I didn't think that we could hit this goal or meet this annual yearly progress, to use an old term gone by, or meet this standard based on this criteria, I wouldn't put it up here. So making data part of your classroom and part of your school and part of your processes is probably a foundational part of that. Any other thoughts on collective teacher efficacy before we go to another theme that we saw?
I think a thought I had is, like you said a couple times, school where we have high evidence that they do have it. I think the other side of it is the school where the teachers are regularly saying, oh, that would never work with my kids, things like that. I think start focusing on collective teacher efficacy as a school, then that's how we change that behavior, right? We, in our PLC meetings, we're like, oh, remember, it really matters that we show this collective teacher efficacy, so we're going to change our behavior.
Right.
And
so the data leads to a change, adjusting practice. There's a connection. So it's one thing to get benchmark data.
Right.
And it's another thing to use that data to adjust practice.
And we have a norm that we're going to hold each other accountable when somebody says, well, that's not going to work with these kids. I love what you said, Dan, yet, right?
Yes.
We're going to have that power of yet that says, it might not, but we're going to challenge our kids. We're going to make them think. We're not going to bail them out. The advice I give to teachers all the time is be less helpful because you're helping them in all the wrong ways. And we're going to be less helpful. We're going to challenge our kids. We're going to make them problem solvers and critical thinkers. We're not going to over scaffold. That can be a lever
Right.
to change behavior.
Right. And then just thinking about one thing I see that's an indication of collective teacher efficacy is are teachers in each other's classrooms. If I know that you're doing really well in this area, if we have a collective viewpoint, then I need to be in your classroom observing what you do. And you need to be in my classroom giving me pointers or some way to do that. It should be a structure. Sometimes people use instructional rounds and such. I want to get to our next theme that we saw over this last few weeks. So we talk a lot on these podcasts, Ashley, about planning. You talked about how that's something that you're trying to improve, that you sometimes have ideas and you have a great idea and then you're like, I'm going to do this idea, and that's your lesson. And you're trying to be more purposeful, and you got suggestions from our coaches on how to do that.
Yes, I am both the biggest planner you'll ever meet and the worst planner you'll ever meet, because I'm the person that likes to plan the fun activity, the party, whatever it is that's going to be. But then it's like the details of that plan. Like, I want to do the creative part of the planning. I don't want to do the details that make that creative plan work. So, and that's just in life, not just in teaching, but definitely in teaching too. So, for example, I'll be like, oh, I have an idea for this great assignment, and I'll plan out the assignment, the fun assignment itself. And it's going to go like this, and we're going to have balloons in class, and we're going to have a clown and whatever we need. And then I never do the next step, or probably the first step, which is the most important part, where I then say, okay, well, when we're doing all these fun things, how are they going to make the connections to the learning that I need them to do?
Right. Does the person at the party like clowns? Do they have a clown phobia?
Right.
What's their idea of a good party? So one thing almost everybody said who did planning, I'm thinking about Christy, Michelle, Juliana, Deborah, they all talked about learning goals and success criteria. And they talked about like taking a lot of time to take your standard and do learning goals and success criteria. And I go on Facebook sometimes. I try to avoid it as much as possible, but sometimes it just sucks me in. And I was on the other day, and there was a newspaper article about two teachers that got into a fight. And underneath the comments was just hundreds of comments. And they were all these really funny but snarky comments like, well, did they have their learning target up? What was their success criteria? Did they have their learning standards posted? Which indicates to me that while people like you and I, Jason, who tell teachers or recommend to teachers the importance of posting learning targets and success criteria and sharing them with students and all of that, and we heard it multiple times on these podcasts, in the real world of classrooms, it's sometimes viewed as a checklist, as a do it for the admin for a walkthrough. Like if someone comes in, they want to see. And it's not always making a connection to like, how will it help my students do better on their tests, their essay, their exam, their benchmark? So why do you think this keeps coming up, and why is it important for teachers to actually take seriously?
I think it keeps coming up because sometimes we, meaning it could be coaches, it could be the leader in the building, don't always sell the why. Is that Simon Sinek, why, how, what? We start with the what. You need to put learning targets on the board and success criteria. And so it becomes going through the motions. I remember as a classroom teacher, I taught in Florida, we had to put the Sunshine State standards on the board. I literally wrote SSS.M.9. Right. That meant nothing to the kids.
Were like, ooh, 9.2. Thank goodness.
Right. Oh, thank goodness we got to that when I was
9.3 is coming around the corner.
Right. Right. It meant it had no effect whatsoever. And so if we don't sell the why, if we don't have the learning target is not for the teachers to use learning targets, right? Like if my learning target for telling them is why do they want to my learning target is to understand that clarity, the more clear you are, the better the students will handle what's coming. And a learning target is and the success criteria is how you add clarity to a lesson. Here's my test as a teacher. I go in, and here's my favorite story I'm going to share. My son comes home from school. He's in 10th grade. What'd you do in math today? We played with Skittles. Interesting. We explored deeper into it. Eventually, he told me he got to the math of the lesson. That his takeaway from the lesson was Skittles. Played with Skittles. His teacher and me, I'm friends with his teacher. We had a discussion about it. Fast forward 4 years. My daughter's in the same class. Comes home. What'd you do today? We modeled exponential decay using Skittles.
Dang.
Same class. He started using learning targets. So now all of a sudden, she didn't just play with Skittles that day. She saw the math. And I mean, it was because of that event and the discussion we had with the teacher. I don't coach at the school. We were just sitting at a tennis match and we had this discussion. He's like, "Ooh, that's interesting, Jason. Let me try it." So he starts, and the learning target mattered. It added clarity to the lesson. So we didn't just play with Skittles. As a coach, go in the classroom. As a teacher, at the end of your lesson, be like, whisper, "Hey, tell me what you did today." All the time I walk around, I'm like, "Tell me what you're doing right now." The kid's like, and it has nothing doing whatever. We're cutting out cards and pasting them to a piece of paper. Oh, great. Big deal. That's not the lesson. That's the engaging thing that makes them happy. But it's not the lesson. They're creating a top-down topic web, something like that.
So you're really, when you're writing, so your goal when writing a learning target, I can statement, success criteria, the question you're asking yourself is, how do I make crystal clear to my students the purpose of this lesson and what they need to do and why they're doing it? How do I communicate that? And one way to communicate that is through learning target.
Yeah.
So I know I am really guilty of what we're talking about.
Murder.
Yes. Hopefully not. Don't talk about that on this podcast. But I have my learning objectives in my syllabus because it's required to be there. And on the first day, we go over the syllabus and I don't even mention them. That's in the part of the syllabus that, like, you can read that on your own. And we go straight to the important parts, like my rules in the classroom or whatever. And then we never bring those up ever again. And I'm just assuming, well, they're there. Like, I'm going to be teaching them research this semester. I'm going to be teaching them argumentative essay. Like, we're hitting all those goals, but I never actually look at them. And if I'm not looking at them, they're definitely not looking at them. And so I know everything you're talking about right now is definitely, I'm like doing that thing when you're in a meeting and you know you're the one that they're talking about. And you're just kind of like looking away, avoiding eye contact. But I know that's something. And I'm liking what you're saying because I always did think about it as more work for me. Like, oh, if I'm sitting there and then I have to reverse scaffold and I have to do this and I have to do that. But it's what you're saying, or what I'm hearing you say, is it's not for me. I mean, it is for me too, but it's for the student. So it's helping them if I put more of a focus on those.
When I go to a school and I hear teachers say, or even coaches or supporters say, they want to see when they come in, right? They want to see this, or it's important to have this because they expect this. That's a warning for me, because it kind of tells me that the focus is on compliance with the administration. And maybe the administration hasn't been exactly clear about the target, about why and the purpose. Now, it depends, but that just is something I sort of stands out to me with a lot of these things like learning targets and posting, things that are posted. There's usually a reason why those are there. And a great teacher often looks past some of the cultural, when I say the culture of the school vibe that might accrue, and actually asks themselves, well, why is this important? Why do they want me to do this? Why is this a practice? Because those practices are usually beneficial if done well. They don't usually just come out of nowhere. And learning targets specifically, like you said, Jason, teacher clarity is up there with collective teacher efficacy as one of the highest impact strategies or practices. And I think about the millions of parents who have asked their children, what did you learn today?
Yeah.
And probably a large percentage of that is a teenager being a teenager. But there's also maybe a percentage of that's also teachers maybe could have been a little more clear about what they're doing. I'd like to do some action research and follow my 16-year-old son through the day and then ask him that question, like invisibly, and then ask him that question. But
yeah,
it's a tough one.
I think you're right. I think it's something that that can be formative assessment for a principal too. Like if we're walking around, if the teachers are doing it just to go through the motions, I love what you said about compliantly. That's formative assessment for me as a principal or coach that says, I better sell this better, because it only has it has a high effect size if the teachers aren't just going through the motions, right? When I was putting SSS blah 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 on this, I was just going through the motions because I needed, when the principal came in with the evaluation form, I needed that check mark on that little box that said teacher put standard on the board, right? It had no effect on student learning whatsoever.
I updated my observation that I use form. Mm-hmm. And what I say is, can the student explain the lesson, the purpose of the lesson? Like often is it posted, but to me, doesn't tell me as much as can the student explain the purpose of the lesson, which gets to, that's an indicator about learning target. Anything else you want to say about teacher clarity, Jason, or Ashley, before we talk about our last theme that we noticed?
Oh, I can't wait for the last theme.
Okay. This last theme is SS 6.132. Okay. We noticed that engagement is the word that comes up the most in these podcasts. If we did a search and looked for the word that is mentioned the most, that's going to be it. And if you ask...
That and planning.
And if you were to ask every principals and assistant principals, what do you want to see in your classrooms? What do you want to see more of in your classrooms? They'll all tell you engagement. And that's because one, there might be one is, I think, and we work mostly in secondary, it's hard to get teenagers interested in things. It's just really hard, and it takes work, and it's not something that just happens. So that's one factor, I think, a root cause. But because we believe in collective teacher efficacy, we believe that we have the ability to do that. So Christy did a great job talking about engaging students through curiosity. She talked about how to start lessons with questions or tasks, which you were saying, Jason, that the kids may not exactly know the answer to or have a clear answer, but that sort of builds interest because it's a little challenging. And I followed up on that and talked about why starting off with open-ended questions that have more than one answer, or concepts that challenge what kids think they know, can have an impact. So I talked about what engagement a little bit. I guess my question is, when we talk about engagement in classrooms, what do we really want versus what do we sometimes superficially think we want? I think there's a vision we have of engagement, and then there's like true engagement that leads to learning. And how do we navigate through those two? That's a big question. Go
I
ahead.
think that's something that I'm going to say struggle with, I guess. I feel like everything you've said today, I've just felt like that's something I struggle with. Like,
Yeah.
kind of pick a theme next time of something that I could say, I'm really good at that. I'm like the expert. But I have no problem. Like what you said, I have teenagers in my classes, it's all teenagers, and I can get them, unless I have an 8 a.m. class. That's the exception to what I'm about to say. I can get them up and moving and talking. Like I can get them in, I'm putting this in quotes that nobody can see, engaged. That is not a struggle for me, probably because I am the person that when I said I plan the fun parts, but not the work part. And so then you look at my class and you're like, man, her class is so engaged. Like, how do I get my class like that? But that doesn't mean that they're doing any better on a test. In fact, they might be doing worse or on an essay, because just because they're having fun doesn't mean they're learning. And so to me, you can talk about engagement all day long, but you have to address what you just said, which is, okay, is engagement they're up and moving and discussing in class, or is engagement they're up and moving and discussing in class in a way that's going to get them to learn what they need to learn?
It sounds like you're saying engagement can be fun, but it doesn't necessarily have to be fun. There's overlap between fun and engagement, but
Yes.
there's also other types of engagement that matter.
It's fun is the tool or the vehicle, or fun should be, if it's fun, it should be the vehicle that gets you to the destination, which is learning. It shouldn't be the destination itself.
Fun can be an on-ramp towards
Yeah.
engagement.
Yes.
Skittles.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the defining question when I go in and out of classrooms is, are they engaged because of the teacher, or are they engaged because of the lesson, the content? And I think we're looking for engagement based on the content. As a classroom teacher, I think a lot of times I was pretty engaging as a presenter, funny, crack a joke here and there. Kids are leaning in.
I love when you break into song and dance.
You taught in Star Wars masks, sometimes stupid stuff that got stood on desks, stuff that got them leaning in, but it wasn't always because of the math. And authentic engagement is centered around the task itself, something that's making its way around in math classrooms. It's called vertical, non-permanent surfaces, right? And so they're standing at these boards, working in threes, doing math. And it's engaging. Just the fact of them standing up and working on a surface is engaging. The problem on the board matters. If I'm really going to label this lesson as engaging.
Right. They could be up there playing hangman.
Yep.
And so they're engaged, but what are they engaged with?
Right. I mean, a kid sits on their cell phone, they're engaged.
They're engaged. Right. What are they engaged doing? The assignment matters. And that takes us a little bit to our friend Marty.
Yeah.
And his episode, if anybody is interested in career and alignment and career connects, I'll figure out how to talk today. If anybody's interested in how to connect their instruction to career interests and aligning it to career, that's a great episode. And he thinks about instruction through the design process because he comes from industry. And he looks at learning as the old saying, understanding by design, right? From our friends, Wiggins and such. And if your instruction and if your lesson is aligned to careers and students are engaging in something that is interesting because it's important to them and it's important to what they want to be or what they want to do or just something that they're interested in, now they're engaged with the content, right? And they're engaged in doing something that matters to them. If you think about your lesson from the perspective of what are my kids going to do, and what are they going to learn, and what are they going to do to get to that learning, you can think about a lot more in terms of what's actively going to make them think. What do I want them to think about? And how do I want them to think? All of those questions, I think, lead to engagement. They all lead to students having an experience with something, and that's another part of building curiosity, is having an experience. What is the experience that these students are going to have with what they're learning that's going to make it memorable, right? What's going to make it memorable? I think what you described in terms of the verticals, I do think the experience of standing up and working with someone and talking engages more brain than sitting by yourself looking at a paper.
Great.
And so it probably does increase some learning. But again, what they're engaged with makes a difference. There's a famous podcast from the Cult of Pedagogy where she talks about Grecian urns. And it's called The Grecian Urn. And she talks about, her name is, it's just slipped my mind right now, but it's called The Cult of Pedagogy. And she says she's seen classes where kids are learning history of ancient Greece. And to teach that, they make a Grecian urn, and they get newspaper and paper mache, and they have these beautiful Grecian urns. But what they don't have is they haven't read anything, they haven't written anything, and they don't have an understanding of what Greece was, what the democracy was, who the people were, why they're important, how they affect us today. But so if you walk into that classroom, they're talking, they're creating, it's hands-on, but they're not doing a lot of thinking. So to me, when I think of engagement, my question is, what type of thinking are the kids doing, and how are they making that thinking visible? If a teacher thinks through those two things, you're on your way to engagement for learning.
Yeah.
And I think Marty's episode really shows that. And he shows going with Ashley through the process of thinking that through. And one way to do that is from the perspective of career. Go ahead, Jason.
Right. Yeah, no, I was going to say, and think of, I was just going to tie it back to the learning. And what guides the first part is the learning target. The success criteria. The learning target is the content. Now what comes next is, now how can I engage them? If it's Marty, and if we're thinking like that, in something that's authentic to a career, it could be in a problem that's worth solving. If it's Christy, right? It's all these things. The learning target guides what I'm looking for them to be doing. The engagement is how I'm going to get them
make it visible.
Meet that success criteria, make it visible. Yes.
How am I going to make it visible? Yeah. And how are they going to interact with the content? Sometimes we need to read, and that's okay, right? And if everyone's reading, but as they're reading for a purpose, then they're engaged in the lesson. So this is a conversation. I'm going to tie it back to the top here. If we are focused on collective teacher efficacy, then we want to have a collective definition of engagement and come to agreements about what that means, what that looks like, and what are our sort of assurance processes to help us think about, are my students engaged in assignments that matter, in tasks worth doing, in learning targets that actually align to the standard? And we have ways to look at that in our classrooms.
All this is making me think of this conversation I had with a student one time. He kept coming up to me and asking if we could do, because like I said, I do try to make it a little, like, it's entertaining. And I had a student that came up to me and he would always ask if we could do something in class. I don't remember what it was now, but let's say sing a song. He wanted to sing a song in front of the class. And so every day he'd come, or every class he would come and he would ask me, like, when are we going to be able to do that? When am I going to be able to sing the song? And that's not really what it was, just in case that's not clear, but I just don't remember. And finally I said, listen, I'm going to make a deal with you. If you can come to me and you can tell me how singing that song in class is going to help us hit our learning objective, how it's going to actually help us learn that what we're doing for the day, we'll do it. And he could never do that. He could never make those connections. And I thought, I was so proud of myself. I was like, what a good teaching move that I did. But as I'm hearing us say all this, I'm like, I told that student what I should be doing for all the things that I should be doing in my class to get them truly, authentically engaged that we're saying. I feel like I did a good job of telling him what he needed to do to create an engaging lesson. But yet I don't do it myself as the teacher.
Know what he wanted to do every day.
I don't remember what it was. It was something that he thought like would be fun for the whole class to do. Because they would do things like, what was that little cadoodle or whatever was really fun or really popular, whatever the little quiz taking game is. And
Kahoot?
Kahoot, that's what it was. I could not remember. And we would do Kahoot quizzes on the vocabulary or whatever. And students would like do things like, I want to write the quiz for the week. And I would let them write the quiz and they would have their own question. Like they would do the Kahoot quiz questions. Anyway, so I let them do all this stuff. So he was like, this is what I want to do since other students are getting to do these fun things in class. And so, but I just couldn't figure out how it would work. I wish I do remember what it was. I feel like it was like I think it really was something related to singing. I think that's why that example popped in my head, but it was like, let's have a rap battle in class. Like it was like something like that.
English class meets American Idol. It sounds like a class I'd want to be in.
Yeah, exactly. But see, so I told him, I was like, listen, I'm willing to take anybody's ideas. It saves me some planning time, but you just have to do the exact things we're saying to do here. And I've never really thought before right now that I'm like, oh yeah, I hit it on the head telling him what he should do when he's creating lesson plan.
Right. You were coaching him create a standards aligned lesson.
Yes, exactly. So I should have been telling myself. I should have been coaching myself through that, though.
Yeah. Well, we'll interview you about that on the next episode.
Thank you.
We can bring him in and ask him to sing a song for us.
Yeah. Well, a rap. We could do a rap battle. I really think that might be what it was.
Okay. All right, Ashley, why don't you close us out today?
All right. Well, we are going to take off for the summer because we want a summer break, but also we know all the teachers out there listening don't want to listen to us talk about teaching all summer long on their summer break. Go listen
Speak for yourself, but go on.
Go listen to some true crime podcast for the summer. Get your mind ready for in the fall when you come back to school and we're ready to teach people. Except for when you do need that teaching fix, you can come to the Making Schools Work Conference in New Orleans, July 15th through 18th. I'll put that sales pitch there. That's where you can get all your learning needs in and your education needs and all the things you're missing on the podcast every week, because by that point, you're going to be missing us so much. And you can come to the conference and get it all there.
Make sure if you do come, you come say hi to me or Jason and Ashley.
For me, yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
All right. Well, thank you guys both for doing this. I think this is another great episode. Hopefully the people listening do as well. And you guys are great as always.
All right, Ashley. We'll see you later.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Class At Coaching, brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. SREB is a nonprofit dedicated to improving education from pre-K all the way to PhD and into the workforce. Visit sreb.org for resources on instructional practices, teacher data, career pathways, and more. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at SREB-School Improvement and on Twitter/X and Instagram, both at SREB Education. See you next week.